Good morning and welcome to day one of the next 3 days of our Hadrian's Wall Virtual Networking Days event 2022. We hope you're all well, and apologies for a couple of minute delay in getting us all in today. Just a bit of a technical thing at our end. So welcome. We've got a fantastic day ahead, looking at lots of community projects and looking at how lots of people along Hadrian's Wall have been getting involved in archaeology and research, and right across the board in terms of the type of people getting involved. So people like yourselves, lots of young people. So we're in for a really good day, and we hope that you're set to join us all day. Thank you to those of you who came to our launch on Saturday. It was great to see you there, and hopefully you've got a nice overview of the sort of breadth of Hadrian's Wall and the impact of Hadrian's Wall, not just on an international level, but obviously on the local level as well. So we try and do quite a lot in that launch in terms of putting Hadrian's Wall on the sort of spectrum for local, regional, national, international. So thank you for those who came to that on Saturday. So just in terms of housekeeping, as normal, we are pretty well versed in this after 2 years of doing these events. So if you are, you're all muted when you come in. If you can stay muted throughout the presentation, that'll be brilliant. It just shows a little bit of respect to the speakers, so there's no interruptions of barking dogs or screaming children, that kind of thing. That'll be great. We encourage you all to put your questions in the chat. If you pop a question in the chat, I will ask that question of the speaker at the end. And the reason we do that is because some people join us on iPads and phones and you can't see the chat, so I'll always ask the questions. It also means that you'll definitely get your question asked as well. So and if we have time at the end, we can invite you to unmute and ask your question directly. I think that's it for housekeeping. The only other thing to say is, if you are joining us for the day, then we do have to close each recording after each talk, so that we can save that recording, then we can pop it up on our website. So if you're here for the day and you think, why do I have to keep logging off and logging back in? It's just because we need the individual recordings of all of the talks, so that's why. So we hope that you do join us all day for these updates. So without further ado, I am going to hand over and introduce rather our first speaker, and we are delighted that we can kick off this first day with a little bit of celebrity stardom in the form of our very own Dr. Chloe Duckworth, who is based at Newcastle University, where the Wallcap project is currently based. But Chloe is a lecturer in archaeology and runs quite a lot of the archaeology programs in the department, but also has been very busy and involved in the Great British Dig programme, of which that's encouraging people to dig in their back gardens. But I'm not going to spoil any of what Chloe might say. I will invite you to share your screen, Chloe. And in your blurb, Chloe, you mentioned that this was about bringing local communities, a TV comic, a production crew and professional archaeologists together to collide together. And I just love that word collide, because it kind of implies something bad, but I think it could be absolutely genius. And I'm hoping that what you're about to tell us just it echoes that as well. So I'm going to hand over to Chloe and take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kerry. Yeah, it can be a bit of a collision. You know the old thing they say, don't work with children or animals on TV, don't they? But I think archaeologists are a whole separate category as far as the TV production people are concerned anyway. So I wanted to, when you invited me to give this talk, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's here to hear it. I wasn't sure, I was thinking, well, I don't want to just reiterate what's on the screen, because anyone can go and watch that if they want to, you know, but we do a week, we work for a week, we have a whole team of archaeologists on and off screen, as well as all the TV people. So there's a lot of work there, and there's a lot of post-excavation work as well. So I thought I'll try and give a little bit of a flavour of where we are with the post-ex, which is still ongoing, but also some of the behind the scenes stuff that maybe can't come across on the TV. So, you know, we have to tell, TV's a story, so you have to tell a story. You've got 46 minutes in which to do it. And the people who make it, they're very good, they know what they're doing. But obviously, as an archaeologist, there's another story that we tell. So I'll do my best to tread between those, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I should say, you know, the site itself, Obviously, there's also the archaeological company that we work with, who are going to be filing that report soon. So all of that information will be out there, and we're hoping eventually to get a website on which we can put everything that comes out of the show. So all the archaeological reports, but also little videos and things from our find specialists, just giving you extra stuff that you don't get on the show. And that's very much something that we're planning to do. And that's being led by Tasha Bilson, my co-presenter, who is excellent as a community archaeologist and public outreach person. So to go to my talk, so this Hadrian's Wall in your back garden, I've called it. So I'm looking at the Great British Dig the Show and our experience of working in Benwell in Newcastle at the site of the fort there. And obviously, you know, this is all about the community really, and that's what the project is. It's also about this chap who turns up and is actually really lovely and talks to everybody and really enjoys archaeology. But really it is about the community and it's about digging. Just to give you a sense of how this works, because it's not always obvious if you don't do TV. So we have a network, and the network in our case is More For, although we do appear on Channel 4 as well, but it was More For who commissioned the programme and who fund it. So they sit within Channel 4. And then the production company who actually pitched that show and worked with the network, they're the ones who are behind most of the decisions, but that then goes back to the network. So the production company is called Strawberry Blonde TV. We work with them. They're the ones who liaise. They're the ones who employ researchers to go and investigate the sites and these kinds of things. But ultimately, editorial decisions can also be taken by that network as well. So it's just to explain a little bit about how what you see on TV relates to what we actually do. And then the absolutely crucial third partner in all of this is our archaeological company, it's Solstice Heritage. They are based in the Northeast, and that might have something to do with the fact that our first series included a dig in Benwell and a dig in South Shields out of only 4 digs. So yeah, I think we gave that away a bit. But Solstice Heritage are really crucial because we do everything properly by the book as an archaeological company. I say we, I don't work for Solstice, I work for Newcastle University, but we work closely together on this. Just to give you a sense as well of where I'm coming from, I've stolen this from Neil Redfern of the Council of British Archaeology, because he was telling me this wonderful idea he has in his mind of commercial archaeology and community archaeology and the research archaeology and how they can all come together. Now, I added government in because technically speaking, that is a separate strand. So when we're talking about, you know, archaeologists working in local government or you know, finance liaison officers, would also say things like Historic England. There are more bodies going on here than just the commercial ones. But we've got commercial archaeological units. So we're working with a commercial archaeological unit with Solstice Heritage. A lot of what they do is ahead of development and construction, but they also engage in outreach and community projects. And so many commercial archaeology units do that. Again, we're all working together. So all of this, the research side, which is more where I sit, I suppose, but also the community side. And I saw that Gulfarine was here. So hi, Gulfarine, but she's in my photo here because Gulfarine is currently doing an MA at Newcastle. So she's in that research side, but she's also a member of the local community and lived until quite recently, I think, in Benwell, quite near to where we were digging. So, and here she is working with Solstice Heritage. So it is all really connected. And I wanted to make that point because I think it's great. So I'll talk a bit, I'm going to give a bit of kind of behind the scenes stuff, what it's like to do this, what it's like to make a show. This is me helping Don O'Mara to try to rapidly dry his sample because of course we don't have much time. So if stuff comes through in the last couple of days, we want to get it processed. If it doesn't get processed in time for the TV, that's okay. It's going to go into the post-excavation report. But if we find something exciting, we want to get it in there. So sometimes it's a bit of a rush. It's not quite time team. We have a bit more time than they do. Technically, really, it's more like 6 days because setting up and backfilling and everything takes longer. And the first series, which Benwell Roman Fort was the first episode of, was filmed in late 2020. It was filmed in late summer 2020. And we'd all been through, all of us here, you know, we'd all been through that period of lockdown. It was a very strange time. We had to respect social distancing. We had a lot of rules in place. Face masks were being worn all the time off camera. So a lot of the crew were wearing them, for example, even when they were outside. And so we had to do a lot to get that sense on camera of closeness that you normally get. So if you ever see people acting, they tend to stand too close to one another because it looks better on screen. It looks weird in person. So you can imagine that, you know, already we're having to distance, you know, so all these things, these little behind the scenes factors are kind of going into play when we're making the show. And this is us on the left using a bit of a perspective trick to try and make a big deal about British Archaeological Jobs and Resources, their Respect badge, which is all about their anti-bullying campaign. But yeah, we had to sort of line up about 8 meters apart from each other. But yeah, so just to give you a sense of that behind the scenes, all of this stuff going on. I can't answer the mystery of the creepy owl behind Don. I'm afraid I will never know what it's plotting, but do beware if you are in the Benwell area, because I think it's rather sinister. So I'll do a bit of a run through of the site and a bit of a talk about the finds, but I'm going to leave a bit of space for questions. I'll probably just interject in my own monologue with some random memories I have, because that's, you know, it was, what I will say, it was a fantastic experience at Benwell, because it was the first one that we did when we knew we had a series, when you had 4 to film. We were all so tired after lockdown and everything, and we were so anxious though, because we kept thinking this is going to get shut down any minute. We're going to have another lockdown, and somehow we managed to avoid them. And we did manage to avoid in that first series any COVID related mishaps. A couple of people weren't able to come, but no one that couldn't, like, they couldn't do work from home, or we could find someone else to do it. That wasn't the case in series 2. We had multiple absences due to people getting pinged. So our star presenter, Hugh Dennis, was absent on some occasions, and there was one occasion where we thought he might get pinged, so we filmed all of the last day scenes on the first day, but don't tell anyone. So that it's in the, if anybody's watched the series, it's in the episode about Benwell Hall. And at the end of that episode, we all stand around and say, oh, so what did you think? What was your favourite bit? And we say, yeah, it was really, I liked the digging, because we didn't know what we were going to find. So yeah, this is the world we live in. But here's the site, beautiful. Here's the bit that you can see if you visit the Den Hill Park Estate, which is where we excavated. And so, of course, what we've got here is we've got part of the vallum, the Roman ditch around the fort, and the crossing point of that vallum, which are just there. There's a chap with a gate, with a key, and you know, it's looked after by the local community. And when we talked to people, and again, I don't think this probably is even in the edit that you see on screen, because it's not long enough to fit all it in. But when we talk to people, when we go and we visit the sites that we're going to work at, and we're digging and we're chatting and, you know, having a cup of tea and talking with the homeowners, so many of them said one of the following 2 things. Either I was attracted to this place when I saw this Roman ditch here, or I've always wanted to do archaeology. And I hear that all the time. The second one, almost every community we visit, there's at least one person who's always wanted to do archaeology. And that, I think that speaks volumes. I think it's something that in Britain, I think we have such a strong sense of our archaeology. And I just want us to cling on to that, I want us to hold on to that, because I think it's incredibly powerful. But the other thing is that if you just think about development and construction, And the fact is, this is anecdotal, but there were multiple people telling me that, yeah, they wanted their house because they saw that there and they wanted to live near that. So when developers are looking at the value of archaeology, that it's right there, you know, I mean, it's literally, it is, of course, it's not financial value, archaeology, so much more than that. But the fact is that it's actually not in any way harmful to development to keep it in there. And I think it's a really important point, because we've done 15 digs, so we've worked with 15 local communities. And whenever there's any above ground thing, people have said that's been a factor in living there and wanting to live there. And it's been something that has brought the community together as well. But I have to say as well that once we've been, and people have realised what's below ground, that also brings community together. So that's great. This community was fantastic to work with. Here is the housing estate that's currently at the site. So this is 1930s, it was built in the 30s, you can sort of recognise those 30s houses really. And we've got just that vallum and that crossing point in the front there in that green patch. So this is looking north from the river. So behind this photograph in towards me is the river. The little map that I've pinched off Wikipedia there is just running from the east at the bottom of the image to the west at the top, showing all the forts and showing Condercum, which is Benwell Fort. I kind of love that this estate is in a playing card shape, which is the classic Roman fort shape, even though this road doesn't cover the location of the fort wall, as you can tell by where the vallum is. But I just found that fantastic. I thought, oh, look at that. It's a little playing card shaped estate built on top of a Roman fort. And this is in West Newcastle. It's right in the heart of the city. I'll kind of come back to that at the end, because I think there's quite a lot of interesting stuff going around this. So before we went there with the show, what we know of the history of the site, some of the fort was lost when they made Benwell Reservoir, High Reservoir in 1858. But there were excavations in the early 20th century. So Petch, first of all, looked at the commander's house and uncovered a possible part of a hospital building. Then during the 1930s, as the estate is being constructed in Richmond, and F.G. Simpson ran an excavation. They did it quite short notice, and I think it was really a rescue excavation, is I suppose the modern terminology that we'd use. So their strategy was very much about, we want to know as much as we can about this general layout of this fort before the houses go up. So they got a general plan, but that's how we know, or we knew before we came there, roughly where the fort was. They made a focus on the headquarters, found bits of granaries, workshops, some of the double barracks, and they also put a load of trenches in around the walls and the gates to try and establish the extent of them. And then there's other stuff going on. So other stuff around, we've got temples, we've got extramural settlements, and also just general monitoring when other developments are going on. So there's work going on, but that area of the fort where we went with the Great British Dig and Solstice Heritage hadn't really been looked at since the 30s. So we had some questions. We wanted to establish what we could find about the extent of the fort and the vicus settlement that would accompany it within those areas that Richmond and Simpson hadn't been able to look at. And we wanted to further define some of the things that they'd found, because of course they didn't have time to do an extensive excavation. So I'm just going to run really quickly through some of the trenches. I might have to just for a moment escape just to check my notes, because I've stupidly not said which trench. I'm pretty sure that's trench 1. You know, when you dig and then you don't remember necessarily, but as soon as you see it, it does start coming back. Yes, it does come back. So I remember this now. So this was a trench under some astroturf. And this was the most southerly trench, right? The garden that this was in is sloping off towards the back, right down towards the river. This was largely, there's quite a thick layer of 19th century levelling and dumping. We found a lot of lovely 19th century finds in here. A lot of the classic stuff that you find when you do any kind of dig in this country, but especially a back garden dig. So bits of blue and white ceramics and clay pipes and glass bottles. And then underneath that was a sealed soil horizon. So this soil horizon has been deliberately sealed, so it's been preserved as it was. So it would have been the topsoil and the subsoil. And then because they've leveled this land out in the 19th century, which we know by the finds within that context, that soil level has been preserved as it was. And the top part of that soil still has some 19th century finds in it, but as we go down, it starts to become more of what we'd call a sealed context. And it looks like quite a long period of land use, agricultural land use here. And that was part of the sort of thing that Don was getting when we were looking at his, when we were sieving his samples and getting what seeds and grains he could out of there. And then in the sort of subsoil and below that, there are a whole load of Roman finds as well. Some now, so we're not seeing Roman structures here from the Roman settlement in this trench, but we're still finding tons of Roman stuff. There really is a lot of it. And that's true all across the estate. So these trenches are all located in people's gardens, every single one of them. So this one, and rather annoyingly, tended to crop up on a lot of, the newspapers got hold of a photo. The production company, bless them, because they're great and they're great at making TV, but they don't always understand the paranoid fears of archaeologists. And we did not want this circular trench everywhere because it looks mad, like we've done some kind of alien landing ground. But what it was is there was a kid's trampoline in the garden. And that's what's created the circle, and it's what's created those big impressions in the ground there. And what you can see, I hope, is that we then excavated a rectilinear trench within that, which then has a small extension to it. But all we get in the Daily Express and everything is this mad circle trench. But what can you do? I guess it's fun. But anyway, you can see within it, you can see this area where we've excavated. And this one was fantastic. We had quite substantial walls, sandstone blocks, and the keen-eyed of you will probably notice the pivot hole for something like a door jamb on one of those blocks. This area had all been kind of leveled out. There was a sealed context when we dug down a little bit, put a little tiny sondage within this trench. It's more of, I mean, the trenches themselves are so small, they really are sample trenches anyway, but within those we've put even tinier sondages at times. That had, we found a layer of demolition. So the sondage found that the wall goes down quite a few courses. So it's been then infilled with a layer of demolition, and that included 3rd and 4th century material. So if it's got stuff dating to the 4th century, then this thing is not going to be, that demolition layer isn't earlier than the 4th century. So we know that demolition layer probably contains a bunch of stuff from all through the life of the fort. One of the things that one of the things I think is incredible when we think about this fort and we think about Hadrian's Wall in general. We went in the show, we went and worked on the Antonine Wall as well. So we did an excavation in Falkirk in Scotland, and it was fantastic. And that is your kind of classic snapshot, smoking gun. You know, I found bits of burnt building at the bottom of my trench. You know, they burnt it down and legged it back to Hadrian's Wall, haven't they? But it's your kind of time capsule thing, because this thing is occupied for 22 years. But most of them while it's being built. Whereas Hadrian's Wall, it's such a long period of time, isn't it? You know, it's hundreds of years. We're looking at the difference between us and the golden age of piracy and the first English dictionary. And so, yeah, it's all Roman, but my goodness, is that a lot of generations? Is that a lot of time? Is that a lot of change? And it's extraordinary because this area, you know, this spans so much of that time period. And so I think when when we kind of look at this stuff, and I always try and I always make this reference to Back to the Future, where he says, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally, Marty, but it is fourth dimensional, and it's an extraordinarily long time period. So I digress. I told you I'd do that though. So I'll just run through some of the other trenches. I love this one. I absolutely adore this trench. You can see the plan here. And what we've got here is we've got a bit of a surviving portion of a Roman barracks wall, which has then been cut into, well, one by Richmond. So Richmond and Simpson also had, this was part of the area they excavated. So we wanted to look at we wanted to extend out where they'd looked at some of those barracks and see if we could find more. I should have mentioned at the start of this talk, by the way, that this is a cavalry barracks. So yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. But so we found their trench cut, and that's kind of had cut into part of that wall. But then, separate to that, presumably after that, because of the time they were digging in the 30s, somebody else has gone in and they've cut quite deep into the ground and they've installed an Anderson air raid shelter, and that's the corrugated shape that you see in the background there behind the wall. So I'll just put that up again so you can see that Anderson shelter. Anderson shelters are very recognizable because they're made of this corrugated steel. They tend to survive a bit better than some of the more ephemeral air raid shelters. Although we also on the show, we did find a more ephemeral air raid shelter with a wooden floor, surviving floor. But I just think, for me, what this makes me think of is in the 1940s, and probably in 1941, I should think, I'm trying to think about it, but somebody has gone into their back garden, they've purchased their Anderson shelter. They're probably pretty well off. I mean, they've got these lovely new constructed houses. They only probably bought their house recently in the 30s, and then we've got war, and it's, you know, it's terrifying, but they've got a good sized garden, and they've gone into their garden and they've dug down in order to put their Anderson shelter. I wonder what they found when they did that, because we certainly found plenty of stuff. I suspect they would have been somewhat aware of the fort because the excavations had only been quite recent. So I like to think about that, and I wonder what they did with the things they find. Did some of the kids maybe keep any of the bits that they'd found? Did they put them on a windowsill? Did they have them on a little row in the shelter when they were down there sheltering from the air raids? I don't know, but I like to think about it. And again, it's all fourth dimensional, isn't it? You know, this is the fact that this shelter has cut into this Roman fort is actually a whole separate story that's really interesting in its own right. But there was loads of evidence here. So we had remains, quite a bit of iron stuff, which makes sense. We know there are workshops in the area, and you've got cavalry, so you need a lot of horse gear. There was also a boot nail, which is fantastic. Just a really personal item, I think. It makes me think of the sort of thing that you see at Vindelander with the shoes. This trench here was investigating one of the turrets along the fort. It was just to get us a better sense of it. And there was an Anderson shelter here as well. So they're such a common thing in back gardens of the houses that were built before the 40s. And this trench, I suppose it's what our Jim Brightman from Solstice Heritage might call a connoisseur's trench. So I don't think it made the edit on TV because it's quite difficult to explain. But essentially, once you get past the more recent stuff in the Anderson shelter, there was a fort wall there. It was rubble infill. It had lovely facing stones. And what we found, what our archaeologists found, was the robbers' cut, where they'd come in and they'd cut into the foundations that the Romans had originally put up after the fort was abandoned, and taken out all those nice facing stones so they could use them in their own buildings. And what you're catching, there was a lot of rubble infill there. This trench was the one that I was mostly working in with Robin Taylor Wilson. So I should say we always have a professional archaeologist assigned to each trench. So the presenters, we work between trenches, but we can't stay in there all the time and dig because we have to go and do some bit of filming, and I did actually try this in Falkirk because I was desperate and we really needed another trench, and we'd lost half our crew to COVID alerts. And they let me put a 1 by 1 meter sounding in, and I dug it in a day. And if anyone watches that episode, it's in series 2. I looked a disgusting mess the whole time because I was running between having to film stuff and trying to dig. And in the end, you know, poor old Robin, who I was working with here, had to draw my section. So it's irresponsible of us to have our own trench just to ourselves, because it ends up with someone else having to record it, and obviously that's not great. So this is why, so it's important to say, anyone watching, if you do watch this show ever, there are all these archaeologists behind the scenes that you just see in the background, and they're the kind of the real heroes of the show. So this is for them. But this was a fantastic trench. It was amazing. So just to summarize what we have here, it was very waterlogged. There's a thick layer of a kind of thick ceiling layer of very modern rubble, well, not very modern, but relating to the 1930s building, to seal down this deposit, which was quite waterlogged. So they wanted to build up their garden. And within that, what we have is an alignment that runs approximately from the approximately down from the centre of the fort towards the vallum crossing. And it looks as though we've got building fronts, a street and a drainage ditch, hence the water. But it's that alignment that's really great. Now, the key thing about this is in these areas where we were digging, I wanted to say, to shout out to those archaeologists, this is Ben Moore, who has worked on so many of the forts on Hadrian's Wall over the years and associated sites. But this was the first time that a site code matched his name. So I just thought I'd put it on there because he was delighted. So Ben 20. What we found with all of these structures that we found was that we were getting evidence for between the wall of the fort, where all the barracks are, and the vallum, we're getting evidence over time for all these buildings. And so what we think we're getting is the civilian settlement where it shouldn't be, but we know that often it does end up over time expanding, and it looks like in this case it's expanded towards the area of the fort. But I'll show our illustration of that in a little while. I'm just going to briefly talk about the finds, but what I haven't done, because the finds processing is still taking place, and there are still finds reports to come in. I have to write a report on the glass, which I haven't done yet, but that's not my fault. I haven't seen the glass, I have to say. I haven't yet seen it, so it's not me being bad. But there are still things to come in. So I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the finds that popped up on the show. That full archaeological report is going to be out quite soon. I think it's nearly ready. And that will all be available in the so-called grey literature. You know, people will be able to access it if they look for it, but also we're going to try and make it more accessible as well, hopefully. So this, just the lovely thing about this, what we do on the show is that, and we've kind of, I think we've honed it now. So by the time we did series 2, it works a lot better, but we get all of our finds out. We have everyone standing behind the tables. We have all the specialists. So here's Francis McIntosh, wall curator, who was our find specialist for this week. And we had Donna Mara from Historic England as well, who was doing environmental stuff. And Marcus Abbott, who does the reconstructions. And us as well, us archaeologists. And we stand with the finds, we talk to people about them. Kids come, they look, they talk about it, they understand, they start to get a sense of how it all works and how it comes together. And the sense of awe that people get about what they found in their own back gardens. I mean, we found a very, very corroded coin. It's been x-rayed. You can just about make it out a head. It's about the right size to be a Cistercius, but we can't say too much. But, you know, it's extraordinary. We've got clay pipes. If you dig in your garden, that's the kind of thing you might find, and they're fantastic. So, you know, 19th century gentleman walking around when this land was a park, puffing on his pipe. A beautiful bit of glass. It doesn't look like much, but that's cast glass. It's been wheel engraved. It's incredibly colourless. If you if you find something like this, you would be completely forgiven, well, not after hearing this talk, but you would have been before completely forgiven for thinking that's modern. But Roman glass is of an incredibly stable composition. So their glass does not easily corrode. Medieval glass has a different composition, so it's often covered in this iridescent corrosion layer, which is quite beautiful. It's like a rainbow, but it obviously is more destructive. That I think is from I identified it as being mid-2nd century. So that bowl, cast colourless glass bowl, could well be something that has kicked about, because this was found in a layer with a bunch of 3rd and 4th century courseware. That could have been curated for quite a long time, because it wouldn't be the most pricey object ever, but it's not cheap. To make glass completely colourless like that, and if you look in, if you go to Pompeii or you see any images of frescoes from Pompeii, there's one extraordinary one showing this colourless glass bowl full of fruit, and it just looks so modern. And you know, they were really, glass blowing really kind of kicks off in the late 1st century AD. So when Hadrian's Wall is going up and the forts are being constructed, it's still kind of new. People are still kind of excited about it. There's this whole thing about how it's suddenly really cheap to buy glass. And some people have argued that it's democratizing, because if you use blown glass perfume vessels, they're affordable, but your perfume's going to last for longer as well. So suddenly more people can afford perfume. So we're talking about mass production kind of aimed at, I suppose, what I wouldn't really say middle classes, it's not correct for Romans, but that's what I mean, really. And we found quite a few bits of things like this, but I wanted to focus on the glass because it's my area of interest. And it really is extraordinary to think that, you know, people had these fantastic glass bowls that they were eating from, startlingly modern in a way. Fragment of a mortarium. So lovely piece there for grinding food. You can see the grit there. That's going to help you with your grinding activities. We found some Samian ware. That was down in the area where I also found the clay pipe. So that's the area right to the south, where we found lots of jumbled Roman finds, but we didn't find a structure. Beautiful piece of Samian though. Let's close up. I get all these great photos you see from the show, so they can, I don't know, they're all quite artistic. They're not very archaeological, are they? They're more sort of arty, but I quite like that. I think it's a bit different. Obviously the reports have all the proper illustrations in them. And there's Tash, and again, that's Frankie. That's that particular trench where that came up. So it was quite a big trench. You can see the astroturf rolled up at the back there. Fantastic. So what lies under the astroturf? It's the easiest turf removal I've ever had to do anyway. But yeah, so we did a little sounding within that, and that's how we found all this fantastic Roman stuff. So it's a big trench, mostly late, but that Frankie there, who was working at the time for Solstice Heritage, she's put in that sounding and just kicked up a whole bunch of Roman stuff. Greyware rim sherds, beaker, Peter, I think that's Peterborough, I'm not sure. A fragment of an amphora. Also from the site was this beautiful horse's tooth. That's Don looking a gift horse in the mouth. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, sorry about that. So it was a cavalry fort, and I think it's fantastic that we found the horse's tooth there as well. And finally, just to show you some of those interpretations I was talking about, and here's Marcus showing one of the local residents, Paula, fantastic Paula. Her garden was the one with the Anderson shelter and the wall in it. And she's looking here at his interpretation. So this is the kind of classic understanding of the fort and the vicus. So at the top, you've got the line of Hadrian's Wall, you've got the fort walls with the towers, and you've got the road coming down, running over the vallum, the ditch that runs to the south of the fort. And then outside that, you'll have your vicus, your civilian settlement, which serves the fort. But some of the earlier investigations of this site had said, well, we might be seeing the vicus moving up closer to the fort over time, potentially crossing over the vallum. And we think that what we found has indicated that. Now, obviously, this is an interpretation. We haven't excavated all of this area. And I hope that's indicated by the fact that you can see the street map still underneath it, you know. But what we think we most likely have is a clear case of the vallum over time progressing in towards the fort. All of those things that we found, Samian ware, Peterborough, grey ware, glassware, we're looking at imports. We're looking at things coming from all over Britain and further afield as well. And we're looking at something very rich, very, you know, I've termed it cosmopolitan in a chapter of my book. But it really is, and that you've got to think of the wall that way. And I'm sure that most of the people here have probably thought of the wall way more than I have and spent a lot more time working on it. But I think it's fantastic. It reminds us of what a thriving, buzzing area this was. It was not just bleak military outpost. It was absolutely, you know, rich, thriving community with hugely, very, very good connections farther afield. And a lot of people living here, not just soldiers. And that was just a lovely still shot of Paula looking at the digital interpretation. And I love it when people get to see those. And this is Paula again. So I wanted a little Paula thread because we dug at Benwell. We saw the TV show go out, which we dug late 2020. The TV show came out in early 2021. And then we spent last summer filming 10 episodes, and 5 of those have come out and 5 more come out in May. And my head was very far away from Benwell at this point. But then someone sent me a newspaper article and it was Paula. And I thought, oh, look, that's the garden that Ben was digging in. And it's the campaign to resituate the western part of Hadrian's Wall on the Hadrian's Wall trail, which I imagine that people might be quite aware of. But there were quite a few. I know there were reports in the Chronicle as well. And Chion Wura, the MP for Central Newcastle, I know took it to Parliament, and there was a debate in Parliament on the 1st of Feb. And you can see that in Hansard, actually, anyone who didn't know that. So if you go to Hansard, you can see it, because it's great. She says some really good stuff. But I love this, took this quote out because it fits back with what I was saying. We need to celebrate Hadrian's Wall being in the west end of Newcastle. And by doing that, you'll understand more about Britain in Roman times and also more about Britain today. And it's all about those local communities and the community of Benwell and West Newcastle, and looking back at that cosmopolitan Roman community who lived here before. And it's just another little quotation there. But I do think it's important to, this was, I took this quotation actually from the Hansard of the debate, but Newcastle is so often described as a Victorian industrial city, yet like London, it has been an important settlement continuously since Roman times. And I thought, how fantastic, like, to remember that, because the Roman finds were popping out of the ground in every single garden. Some of them, I mean, under the trampoline, it was very close to the surface. It's all there. And I think for me, I moved to Newcastle in 2016. So I've been here for 6 years now. I love it. I'm not leaving. I'm obsessed with the coastline. Northumbrian coast is the most beautiful thing. But I currently live in Howden, Wallsend Way. And it's just, what struck me is that before I came here, I had an image of Hadrian's Wall, I think as many people do if they don't live in the region. And it was Sycamore Gap, and it was beautiful, bleak landscape. And I remember going there as a student and walking the wall, and we did the Robin Hood bit, and you know, we looked at some of the forts, and that was the image I had. And I moved up here, and I found, one, that Northumberland is an incredibly diverse county with way more landscapes than that. But 2, that the wall at this side, at the east side, is threaded through the city. It's just woven into the fabric of the city, and in a way that I think is really, really important. for people who live here. And obviously, you know, living near Wallsend, I've passed through Wallsend quite a lot, and it's very apparent there. But isn't it funny that in Benwell it's kind of tucked away in little places? You can see it, but it'd be nice if, I think it'd be nice if it was more flagged up, frankly. Thanks to everybody for listening to me. I'll be delighted to answer any questions you might have, or at least try to. I think community archaeology, I think local community in general is probably the way forward for our world in a lot of senses. But community archaeology is just so important, and anyone who gives up their time to do it, anyone who's involved in it in any way, I think it's the best thing you can do. And just to acknowledge the community of Den Hill Park, and also all of those archaeologists who, professional archaeologists and some volunteers as well, who came along and did the really hard work so that we could do this and make a show and remind people that archaeology is really great. And thank you all for listening.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chloe. Can I invite people to give emoji a round of applause for that? It's the best way we can do this without lots of noise. Absolutely brilliant. That was so engaging. Thank you, Chloe, for that. I've decided our next project is going to be just to dig in all of your gardens, because then we can find out so much more about the wall and involve you as we go forward. So if that's okay with everyone, I'll just sign you up for that. You're going to hand over your garden. So if you've got a flower bed that needs digging, that'll be us this summer, hopefully. There are quite a few questions popping up into the chat, which is great. Absolutely fascinating. I love the idea of a child bouncing on the trampoline and then a foot underneath, or a couple of meters underneath. You've got all of that archaeology. I think it's mind-boggling just how much information you got from those digs. What I would like to offer, and I feel I'm going to do my little pitch here, a little market stall holder pitch, is that there has been a publication produced on the back of the work that Chloe's been doing, and Bloomsbury, the publishing company, have offered a discount for you guys today, a one-day offer. So I'm just going to share my screen with a discount code. If anyone would like to jot that down, can everyone see this? I'll just, oh, come on, I just need that to, can everyone, the top line of Zoom means I can't make that any bigger, but I think you can see that. And if people want to jot down the code DIG25, you can get 25% off this publication, which I think is money well spent. So what I'll do as well, once you've had a chance to just jot that down, is sorry, I'm struggling with Zoom here. I'm going to stop sharing, because what I'm going to do is pop a link to this in the chat as well. So if I stop sharing, try to do too many things at once here, and then you can all order that booklet if you like. There, done it. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to move on to ask the questions that are in the chat. Again, thank you for people who've dropped things into there. So let's just go through. Where are we? First question for Chloe. Chloe, have the shows proved popular in terms of feedback and viewing figures? Thanks, Alan, for that question.
Yeah, I think we're doing quite well. They're always a bit cagey, but I know that the first 2 episodes of series 2, we were getting, well, it would have been well over 1 million watching at the time that the show aired. I think what's really good about that, it was coming out at the same time as Digging for Britain on BBC 2, luckily not at the same time, but that was getting really good figures. And I think it's a good time for archaeology, because it looks to me like Digging for Britain especially has been getting really, really good figures. And actually they were featuring Newcastle University's student dig as well at another fort on the wall, Third Oswald. So, but yes, it's been doing quite well. And I'm very hopeful that we'll get another series, because it's the most fun you can possibly do. I mean, it's mad. I didn't give you much behind the scenes stuff about working with production crew, but they're mad. It's just because they have to have so much energy. So they're kind of going around all the time. And then you've got archaeologists who are our own brand of weird, and fantastic local communities, and kids and animals, dogs running off with, trying to run off with animal bones. And yeah.
Great stuff, thank you. Gulfarine, hi Gulfarine. I'm sure there's more than one Gulfarine because she seems to pop up everywhere at the moment. You mentioned that in one of the trenches there was lots of finds popping out, Roman coins and a dinosaur. Does anything to add to that, Chloe?
Hello everyone. Hello Chloe, how are you?
Hi Gulfarine, hi.
You have embarrassed me quite a lot by putting my pictures in there.
Oh, no.
That's my
You've got to
my
be
job.
acknowledged. You worked so hard.
Just so you know, there's only one Gulfarine, at least over here. Yeah, it was a plastic dinosaur toy.
Right, okay.
Yeah, we were very envious because I was with Frankie in one of those big trenches where it was the biggest trench actually that we dug, and it was like, you know, we're working hard. It was really hot summer days as well. And then as soon as we opened that trench, which was just a few steps away from us, we found, oh, they found a Roman coin. And I was like, what? We're still digging. We're still trying to dig a trench. How can they have a Roman coin already? And then they found dinosaurs and giraffes and all sorts of toys. And then they were just sitting on the garden wall, just, you know, cheering for us to find more stuff. But yeah,
Thanks for
that's
that.
all there was.
Thanks for sharing that, Gulfarine.
That's
Clearing up the
fantastic. I'd
dinosaur.
forgotten about those. I'd forgotten about those toys. I hope they didn't find them under the coin. But that means that you can't say we don't dig dinosaurs anymore, can you?
Thanks for that. Just working my way down through the chat and the comments. Alistair has rightly pointed out Anderson shelters were usually issued by the government in prefabricated form about 1938 or 1939 and not purchased. So thanks for that clarification, Alistair.
Thank you.
Anna has asked, did the fort at Benwell project north of the wall? If so, did the east and west gates open north of the wall, as happened to other cavalry forts such as Chester?
I think that I'm not 100% sure about this, and there might be people who know better, but I'm not sure that we know, because I think the northern part was truncated by the reservoir. So I'm not sure whether we can be clear on that, but there might be someone who knows better than me.
Is there anybody on the call who knows definitively? If not, we can move on. No. Okay, we'll leave that one hanging for now then, Chloe, if that's okay. Rob, thanks for this. You've put on the Wall Quest community project, you're involved in walking the line of the wall from Headon to Wall's End. And yeah, this was a project looking at the true line of the wall and if it was an option as a walking route. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Rob?
Well, I pressed enter when my text went up, but I did mean to, and I've added later. There was actually a booklet published, wasn't it, Kerry? Do you remember, by Nick Hodgson? And I actually found it the other day. I've managed to find it. So that, you know, there's quite a lot of information there on the line in the wall and how to walk it. There's instructions whether you want to walk it from Headon to Wall's End or the other way. So yeah, so just, you know, there is this lot of talk of realigning the Hadrian's Wall Trail. Yeah. Having said that, you know, I've been involved with the wall since 2008 as a ranger on the trail, and I guess most of the people I speak to on the trail would not want to walk from from Wall's End to Headon, a 12-mile stretch along possibly the you know, some of the busiest roads in the northeast. But having said that, it is an extremely interesting thing for, you know, if people do want to follow the true line of the wall. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob. And again, thanks for your help years ago when we did start wrecking that route. If it's not putting you on the spot, I'd like to just bring John Scott into this discussion. Just John is the World Heritage Site Coordinator for the wall. And I know you've been liaising from a sort of political angle of the line of the wall going through Newcastle. Is there anything you want to add in at this point? And apologies, I've put you on the spot.
That's okay. That's okay. No, it's I think that the line of the National Trail is where it is because of safety reasons and all sorts of things when they set that up many years ago, and they just went down by the river and along that because you're not crossing several roads and there's less risk assessments to write, etc. However, I will say that there's an awful lot of interest from people who are keen to follow the true line of the wall, and a lot of people who want to discover the line of the wall, and even more so since the work of Chloe and the team to raise that profile. I absolutely love it. Kerry's probably asked me because she knows I'm going to say it's my favourite part of Hadrian's Wall, because in my mind, that busyness is exactly what Hadrian's Wall was. It was full of people and stuff and things and rubbish and noise and sounds and things. And the bit at Steel Rig and Sycamore Gap just isn't. It's kind of dead in comparison. So I'm with everybody who's kind of wanting to walk down that route, and I want to talk to everybody that's there, and I want to see the hundreds of people, and I want to see the hundreds of shops, and I want to really experience what Hadrian's Wall is today. And while I'm on, Kerry, because you know I can't say one word, I just want to say that, you know, I really chimed with Chloe's observation about the playing card shape of the estate, and I love the echo of Hadrian's Wall in West Road all the way through that part of town. And I've also seen that done, similar community excavations done in towns and cities in Bavaria. But I was going to say it still influences places like Stanix and Carlisle. And if you go to Vienna, which you never mention in the same sentence as Carlisle, but I'm going to, where the fort was in Vienna is still playing card shapes, and the shops are still aligned to the fort walls, and you can still walk the outline in the middle of Vienna. So just carry on with that heritage right the way around Europe. It does the same thing over and over and over again, and still influences our lives. So.
That is fantastic.
Thanks, John. Chloe, obviously, if you want to jump in and sort of comment on anything that.
Yeah, well, I might just say, I mean, you know, I think it's been really good to hear the perspectives, and I had actually heard about that booklet, but I'd forgotten about it, or I would have mentioned it. But I just think it's raising the profile, isn't it? We don't have to campaign to realign the trail. I mean, some people might want to, but it's just getting it out there and pointing out how important it is and how interwoven it is with the city. And yeah, I mean, I think that the sense of excitement that archaeology can generate is just so great in any community. And so, yeah, all power to it. I think it's great. I'm going to Vienna now.
I think we all are. Clive, thank you for your question. There must be a great deal of material recorded that doesn't make the final shows. Would there be any scope for a series of behind the scenes programmes?
Well, that would be cool, wouldn't it? So I think the issue is the budget, and I have nothing to do with that. But what the fantastic Tash Bilson has been looking at doing, my co-presenter Tash and fellow archaeologist, is to work with Solstice Solstice Heritage to set up an online resource. The issue is financing that. You know, obviously we don't want to ask fine specialists, for example, to give up their time to make videos or show things without being paid. They can't do that. These days we work with the same fine specialists for all the shows. So it's ArchaeoBiz. We're based in where did Cummings dry to? Newcastle. That's it. It's forever associated with Dominic Cummings, sadly. But yeah, so they're based there. But you know, I'd love to do that. I'd love to have something up there that isn't just the report. And that is behind the scenes stuff and is additional information. And I'm very, very keen to see about making that happen. But one of the barriers that, because I was thinking, oh, we could try and get funding for this. One of the barriers to it is that, well, it's also a commercial thing. So, you know, we've got a TV network, and it's more for, if it's Channel 4, there'd be more money. But we've got a TV network, we've got a production company, and, you know, they're not going to pay for that. And if we went for funding to pay for that, I don't know how that would align ethically with the fact that it would then create profit for them. So something I'm chewing over, but we really want to do it, because I'd love to see a website with a map of all the places we've worked, all the post-excavation stuff, but with little videos or animations or whatever, just to bring it to life. I want to do that so much. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I think you asked me something about that and I just started talking and didn't stop.
Thanks, Chloe. I just wanted to ask, is there anyone on this screen who was involved, whose garden Chloe and the team were digging in? Is anyone? Raise a hand. Okay, that's fine. Which kind of leads on to the question that Hillary's popped in the chat. Thanks, Hillary. You evidently found enthusiastic garden owners. What proportion of owners didn't want to let you in?
Well, there's what I found doing this is actually most of the time people are really, really keen. Sometimes the one that really stunned me, I showed a slide of her right at the beginning, was Helen, who had this pristine lawn, and she said, "Oh, we've just had it treated." And then we went in and dug it up. I love doing that. I know it's awful, isn't it? But because they're so neat. A pristine lawn is the best kind to dig. It's so easy. But yeah, so a lot of the time, people do say no, but they're often very polite about it. We had a few people who were just like, nope. But yeah, it's generally speaking, it's if people don't want you to, it's because they've got some good reason, or I don't know, some dark secret.
I love the idea that you just pull back the astroturf and just start digging. Like you say, it's best, the easiest deturfing. We've done some excavations on wall cap that have taken days to do that. So just to actually just pull it back is great. Gulfrey, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
Oh, sorry.
It wasn't. It was a really, really difficult task because we couldn't just roll it, and it was not just heavy to roll that much of the area back, but it was not easy to put back in as well. But I was gonna say Paula's garden, I think, because I love gardening, and if I was Paula, I'll be like, no, please, thank you, because it was really beautiful garden and with lots and lots of ornaments and really very nice, cozy, cute garden. And then we just, dig a hole in it. But also I was going to mention that after
your own garden.
Yeah, after I was finished with this, I was like, ooh, I want to dig my own garden. And I had just moved out of the house that I was in Fenham. And according to the plans, it seems like my house was just outside the Condercum fort, and I was really excited. Unfortunately, at that point, lockdown was placed again in December time. So on 23rd of December, in really, really cold weather, me and my daughter, who was about 11 at that point, we went and started digging a trench in there. But because it was so cold and I was alone and we were just digging, we could only just went up to a certain point. And I did found a few shards of pottery and a clay pipe, which was good enough for me. And then I just put everything back and I was like, no, not going until the Romans. I have to go. I can't do it on my own.
It's a good job. I'm glad you mentioned that, Gulfrey, because I should have said that this is a scheduled monument. So obviously you said you were outside the line of the fort, you're outside of the scheduled area, but I should have mentioned that we did have to get permission. So often, most of the time if you're digging in your own garden, it's fine. But it's always worth checking the scheduled monuments list.
Yeah. But yeah, it was fun.
Good, thank you. Thanks, Gulfrey. I'm conscious. Oh, Jane, you've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute?
Yeah, there's just a couple of observations that I've got, but really just sort of inspired by Chloe's talk and by chatting amongst ourselves. I think the idea of using our 1900th year as a focus, the beginning of a focus about our relationship with Hadrian's Wall, and having these discussions, because we've got this year-long celebration, having these sorts of discussions about what Hadrian's Wall means to us. And that's why I loved the program so much, Chloe, is that actually, and all in the chat, so Bill, I've just noticed, has just put something in about how the conversation that he had with the gentleman at the Vallum crossing when he walked the wall a couple of years ago. Bill, you might want to talk more about that, but how it really made the experience better, because you're just talking to somebody who lives there and is proud of it and who is sharing information. And I think that certainly the partnership board of which I chair, and which is just such like a massive honor to be involved with something so special to the world, that this is really what we're concerned with at the moment. And so the role of the eastern end of the wall and the role of the western end of the wall, of course, and that, the whole of the frontier, so that loop down into Cumbria, I mean, it's unexplored. It's just the most extraordinary opportunity for us to tell the whole wall story. So at the board, we talk about wall or nothing at all. It's actually, we as board members never use Sycamore Gap A in any imagery. And I know people are very proud of it, and I know they're entitled to do it. And I know it's a shorthand to the whole world. Shorthand Hadrian's Wall is Sycamore Gap. Board members don't use that image, A. And B, we do not stand on the wall. And of course, our councillor in Newcastle, all that big article in The Guardian, Rob, who is an absolute passionate advocate of the wall, standing on it would, that would have been the photographer who says, oh mate, can you just, you know, because Rob knows that we don't get photographed standing on the wall. But what this year is to us, 2022, that 1900th anniversary, is to say, we're here now, and this World Heritage Site, this wall of ours, we are so proud, we are so interested. You know, all this added knowledge that this program, the WALCAP program, brings. This is the beginning of us telling our story in our new way. And so this idea of, I loved what Catherine said in the chat about, let's always make sure we talk about two routes through Newcastle of the wall, right? You know, there's the safe route, and Rob's point is really well made. I don't really want to walk on a road where I'm, you know, very concerned about my safety, but I want to know what we know to the best of our knowledge, what the real route of the wall is, and to acknowledge those communities, because we believe strongly that the original northern powerhouse of the world is Hadrian's Wall. 2,000 years ago, this was the most exciting, vibrant, diverse, exciting place to live in Britain. And people made money out of it. And people should be making money out of it now. So the traders who work along the wall, you should be able to go and have that cup of coffee. You should be able to go and stay the night. You should be able to set up a business where you take your mountain bike on the cycle route, or, you know, this is our intention. And so every time I hear, you know, that, like Chloe talking about the television company, and this is just like amazing, because I think archaeology programs have been so popular recently because people want connections with the world. They want to understand, people want to understand why this world is so confusing now, and to know where we come from, and to know that it's just people doing stuff. I'm sorry, that was really, really long, but the power of your television program, Chloe, and the excitement and the respect you showed for communities, and the fame and the sense of pride that you brought to those communities in Benwell, and then you put on the telly, it was brilliant. And thank you very much. Right, I'll mute now.
Thanks, Jane. That's Jane without coffee. I've lost. Oh, there you are, Chloe. Is there anything else you want to add in at this point, after hearing all of the sort of enthusiasm and the feedback from people on the call?
I just want to say it's fantastic. Thank you so much for all your feedback and questions. I mean, I think WALCAP's amazing anyway. I think it's brilliant. I haven't really been involved in it because that's the way the university is. We've all got our little things, our territories, don't we? But absolutely, yeah, I just, long may it live. And this is the right year for it all, isn't it? You know, 1900. So I was going to say as well, somebody mentioned, because I was thinking about this, the wall extending, the fort extending north of the wall being a cavalry fort. I suspect the reconstruction was drawn in that way based on other known examples, and I suspect that's why that decision was taken. I know that a lot of care goes into those reconstructions, and a lot of thought about getting the balance between making them evocative and not kind of over-interpreting what we find. So yes, absolutely, it's in that case quite interpretive, but you know, it is true to an extent that Roman sites, that there are some elements of similarity, aren't there, for all the differences. So yeah, so I've got myself slightly distracted there.
It's okay, it's easily done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if anyone has any comments, any questions that they'd like to ask verbally, and if you'd raise your emoji hand or your actual hand, if I can see you, I can invite you to speak. We did have an unusual moment on Saturday where somebody wanted to play us a song. If anyone was there on Saturday, you'll know what I'm referring to. We probably don't need that sort of interjection today, but very welcome to ask any questions. Anybody like to raise a hand? The floor is open.
This is where I get anxious now.
I know, me too. Oh yeah, Leslie, I'll invite you to unmute and please ask your question. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm late in joining you. So thank you very much. I think I've actually missed the programme that was on the telly. Can I catch it on catch up, or how can we actually see it again?
It's on All 4. So All 4 is online.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's the first episode of series 1. So if you look up The Great British Dig on
Yes,
All 4,
yeah.
It's the first episode, Benwell.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Leslie. Oh, Alistair, you've got your hand up. If you want to show your camera, that's optional, but feel free just to ask your question.
I'll just ask the question rather than get bogged down in trying to work out the technicalities. A couple of things, one of which this question of rerouting the wall path. I think it's a very good idea to have the two options. I did the true route of the wall last year, and it's, as long as you keep your head on a swivel with the West Road, which is very busy, it's really interesting to see. You can see the line of the wall along the road. There's nothing in the way of ditches or anything to see, but you've got those turrets at Denton. You've got the possible remains of Newcastle 4 in the Arts Centre. There's a bit to see of the fort. And then it gets a bit difficult to track from there, but at Byker, there's definitely signs of it. And it's well worth doing. One wouldn't say that either Byker or Benwell are the prettiest parts of the British Isles, but I would echo that business about the contrast between, I sat on the church wall in the West Road and ate my sandwiches and thought, there's no curlews here. This is a very different to Sycamore Gap and Steel Rig, but that contrast is a really valid one. And the other point was, there is a plan in Breeze's handbook to the Roman wall, which shows a bit of those gate turrets just north of the wall. One of them looks like it's fairly imaginary, but there do seem to be gates just north of the wall, as you would have in a cavalry fort like Chester's. So there does seem to be a little bit of evidence, I suspect probably from the 19th century, when some of this stuff was more visible before the reservoir was built. So there is a very, very small amount of evidence for the form of the gate towers at Benwell. And also thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you. Oh, that's really useful to know. Actually, I didn't know that, so thank you. I was hoping someone would.
Thanks,
There really isn't an awful lot, to be honest. Just looking in Breeze's book, and I don't know. That's probably the plan will be a kind of assemblage of a lot of different evidence, because I don't think there is some evidence from the 18th century for the bathhouse at Benwell, which was drawn by a gentleman archaeologist in the 1740s, 1750s, I think, a chap called Stokoe. So whether anybody actually drew the plan of the fort before the reservoir was put in, I'm not sure. I don't know if McLaughlin's survey would cover it before the reservoir was built. But so there is a little bit of evidence anyway.
Thanks, Alistair. Thanks for sharing. We can always count on you to kind of fill in the gaps for us. We do go to Alistair a few times when we need to know details, and that's brilliant. Thank you. And also just to echo, it goes back to a comment in the chat from David Brough, just about that idea of, you know, the line of the wall and the and what John was saying as well about the line of the wall through Newcastle and that representation of the sort of multiculturalism. And it's just to flag David's point in the chat. He says the west end of Newcastle would be an ideal location to tell the story of the multiculturalism of Hadrian's Wall in its heyday. And I think that's echoing what John said just earlier about it would be very indicative of the trade, the sort of the sight, sound, smells, the sort of busyness, and that the diversity as well along the wall. David, I'm going to ask you if you want to unmute and add anything to that. If you're trying to get some more sort of feedback from other people, then that's great. If you want to unmute and just mention something, that you're very welcome to.
No, just simply to check whether I was barking up the right tree or simply barking.
Discuss. No, I think yes to both. You're barking and you're up the right tree. John, did you want to add anything to that?
No, not really, other than just to sort of say the technicalities of getting the trail around, rearranged are just straightforward for people's processes. The national trail as it stands is a thing that's designated finally by Secretary of State. So to actually officially move the national trail also requires the Secretary of State to do that. Obviously that's complicated, many forms, intricate, yada yada, not impossible, but will take a while to do. But absolutely there's no reason why we can't have and can't offer and do offer the alternative route on a true line of the wall. And I've put the link to Nick's booklet in the chat. If anybody wants to copy that down, you can get it and print that off, so you can see where that goes.
Thanks, John.
I'm going to Segadunum tonight. I might buy up all the extra copies actually, and
sell them tomorrow.
And sell them alongside Chloe's book. Actually, I might sell them tomorrow. But I'm just reminded of the trip to Arbea that John and Kerry, you were both there recently. Tyne and Wear Museums and Archives, Keith Merrin, the new director of TWAM, he wants to work with South Shields to also include Arbea into the National Trail, making full factual way. We've got lots of facts about the line of the wall, but actually the importance of Arbea and the importance of Arbea within that community in South Shields, also incredibly important to the east end of the wall story now and then.
Arbea being the fort that's still got its beakers fully intact. Everybody's still living around the edge of it, which I think is marvellous. So I think community in that sort of sense is brilliant. So yeah. I agree with the pedestrian tunnel, Jane. That's absolutely plausible.
Thanks. I think David's point as well was about just a project about multiculturalism as well. I know we've kind of gone off down the route of the line of the trail, but I think it was more about just a general comment as well about that part of the world lending itself to exploring our diversity, sort of then and now. Okay. Graham Stubbs, thank you. You're dropping in lots of useful information in the chat. I'm not going to go through it all, but if people do want to kind of go into there, there's some information there about different excavations and different findings. Yeah, excellent. So I think, with no more questions in the chat, again, I'm just going to ask people if you want to raise a hand, an emoji hand or an actual hand, if you want to ask Chloe any more questions. Oh, Sue's asking, how do the TV company select sites?
Well, so when we made the pilot, they worked with a different director, and he kind of knew somebody who sort of knew a site, and they said, oh, it's a really good one. And what they didn't realise, because they're a TV production company, is the importance of including kind of a kind of proper archaeological investigation, shall we say. And after making the pilot, we kind of had a bit of a chat with them and said, listen, you might want to work with an archaeological company. So what they do now is, with Solstice Heritage, who I've mentioned throughout, the TV company have researchers. So they always will have researchers for this kind of show, but their researchers they work more around making sure we're going to get interest in the local community, whereas what Solstice Heritage do is scope for sites. And then we create a long list, and then there's a short list based on wanting to try to cover as much of the country as possible. We've really struggled with getting sites in Scotland and Wales. We tried so hard. And also wanting to cover a range of periods. and wanting to have sites where we've got a reasonably good chance of answering archaeological questions. So we're not just digging gratuitously, but also of actually finding stuff. So, you know, obviously, if we've got very modern housing development, that often what happens is, and it's an indictment of how important archaeology is, but you'll get, you know, 1.5 meters of leveling, like stuff, everything will be completely raised, and then you'll get it completely leveled up, and there's no archaeology left really to be seen. So it's a long process, it's a time-consuming one. As we go on, people are more and more suggesting stuff. I've thought of one that I'd love to do, but I can't say what it is. But I did throw it over to Solstice. I was like, please do this one, please do this one, please do this one, please do this one. I will say it's in Yorkshire, and I will say it's not Roman, it's 18th century. But yeah, we'll see what happens if we get another series. But it's a long process, but it is done. The first part of that process is very much done by archaeologists. And it's creating that long list. And then once we have a short list, they then go ahead and they do a desk-based assessment, and they look at the, you know, the historical records and the maps and everything. And it's, yeah, then you get like someone who works high up in Channel 4 going, no, we don't want your Victorian prison or whatever. And you say, come on, don't be stupid, that's interesting. So yeah, it's a long process and a long answer.
Thanks, Chloe. John, you've raised your hand. Is that
yes, it was just to add something in there. In my previous, I'm taking it that everybody on this screen is quite interested in archaeology and history in one shape or another, otherwise you've tuned into the wrong meeting. And the sing-along will be later on today, for which I bought a new kazoo. But anyway, but what in my previous life as a prehistorian and working on an archaeological site, I just want to say how important the work of Chloe and TV is in archaeology and its profile. I had the chance to talk to Julian Richards and the guys behind Meet the Ancestors back in the 90s or whatever, and then the Commissioners for Time team. And they sort of blazed a trail in a new way of doing archaeology that I think we're just continuing, and Chloe's work is just like evolving that. At the time, the Commissioners for TV really like archaeology. It gets some of the highest viewing figures for factual TV on telly, and that's through a wide range of society. So not just people that are interested, just people in general. And when you talk to them about it, and the researchers for these TV programs, because they don't lay out money for no apparent reason, they need to know that it's going to be a commercial success. And the two words that keep coming back apparently from these commissioners of TV programs were people love the mystery and they love the investigation. So it's like a CSI almost. I know that's a cliche, but how can archaeology be so popular? Yeah, to be some of the highest rated factual TV on telly, and that's over years and years and years. So thank you for the work of Chloe and so forth. Who knew an ology would be up there on evening entertainment? Do you know what I mean? Next we'll get microbiology, which is obviously one of my favorite ologies. And if you can name the film that clip comes from, you get a reward later on. Well, I just want to say that thanks, Chloe, for all that work and continuing that work from back in the day, you know, with Time Team and Meet the Ancestors and so on.
Thank you. No, I mean, I don't think I can claim to have done much. It's great fun what I get to do. But I have to say, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. We did get told the commissioner wants us to say mystery more. And also we have our own little code words for things kind of behind the scenes. So we always do a kind of midweek sum up. We all sit around and we show Hugh, who, by the way, Hugh Dennis did geography as a degree. And that dude bloody loves archaeology and geography. And like half the time he's saying stuff and we're like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. You know, it's a bit embarrassing sometimes. He asks you questions you can't answer. He also asks you questions off screen and then you answer them. And then he repeats it back to you when they're filming and then asks you a harder question that you can't answer. And you're like, oh, but no, we call it a CSI board when we do that little roundup, because that is kind of how they pitch it, but it works. Archaeology is detective work, isn't it? It's forensic. I've got students who will be coming in 4 minutes because my module is called Cold Case. It's forensics. It's, yeah, I think it's great, detective work. But you just never know if you're right or not, do you? That's the problem. You can't prove it.
Chloe, I'm going to start wrapping this up because, well, not least you need to go and see students, but also because I think we've explored so many avenues and subjects this morning. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Chloe. It's been an absolute privilege to have your time this morning, and thank you so much for sharing in such an eloquent and engaging way the work that you've been doing. So final round of applause for Chloe, please, if I can ask.
No, thank you all for coming and being so lovely and kind, and the extra bits of information I've got. Thank you.
No, absolutely, and hopefully this, we'll Wallcap and Chloe, we can keep talking as we go forward over this next summer. Perhaps if there's any way we can do anything together, that'd be great.